If you still believe the most powerful man in America can hold a children's Easter celebration without the whole country watching him come apart, what happened on that lawn will permanently change that. Donald Trump walked onto the White House South Lawn on Easter Monday carrying 40 years of practiced certainty and a smile that had survived everything the world had thrown at it. Behind him stood a figure in a full Easter bunny costume. 40,000 colored eggs were scattered across the grass. A brass band played something bright and deliberately American. And then, in front of the children, the cameras, and the bunny, Trump announced a bombing deadline. Calm, specific, and certain, while the music continued without interruption. By midnight, Jimmy Kimmel had replayed the clip so many times the edit suite floor was reportedly covered in empty coffee cups. By the following morning, Stephen Colbert had reconstructed the entire timeline on a whiteboard he carried onto his own stage without explanation. And by the end of the week, the two most watched late-night hosts in America had done something that no political opponent, no journalist, and no foreign government had managed to do. They had made the Easter Bunny the most haunting image in American television history. The air on the South Lawn that morning carried the specific warmth of a day that had been arranged. The flowers were chosen. The eggs were counted. The band had rehearsed. The bunny had been briefed. Everything on that lawn existed inside a frame. A careful, deliberate composition designed to communicate celebration, tradition, continuity. The 250th birthday of the Republic. Children in their finest clothes. The First Lady's voice, warm and measured, welcoming the country to a morning built entirely from the grammar of joy. Then Trump stepped to the rope line. He moved the way he always moves, slow, deliberate. The walk of a man who has decided that gravity is optional and space exists to be claimed. He adjusted his jacket before he reached the reporters, a gesture as practiced as breathing. He spread wide when he stopped, posture filling outward, shoulders back, the physical claim of a man who does not stand in places so much as possess them. His eyes found the cameras first, then the reporters, settling on the front row, with the particular flatness of a man who has already decided the outcome of every conversation he enters. The Easter Bunny stood 6 feet behind him. The band played on. Trump's first line arrived before any reporter had finished raising a hand. They've had every opportunity. They simply refused to admit it's over. He was not discussing eggs. What followed was delivered with the unhurried confidence of a man reading from a document he has already memorized. Iran would have no bridges, no power plants, no anything. A complete targeting plan existed. It was ready. The deadline was midnight tomorrow. He did not specify whose midnight, whose tomorrow, whose time zone was carrying the weight of the ultimatum. His personal preference, he added, setting aside the military option entirely, was simply to take the oil, to make, as he put it, a substantial profit. The brass band kept playing. A child laughed somewhere off to the left. The cameras did not cut away. A production assistant who had worked White House press events for 6 years later described the rope line moment as feeling like watching 2 television channels broadcast simultaneously on the same screen. The children's special and the war documentary running together, neither one aware of the other. Trump finished his answer, turned from the rope line with the satisfied bearing of a man who has said exactly what he intended to say, and walked toward the children gathered on the lawn, where he proceeded to tell them about the autopen. The Easter Bunny did not move. The band did not stop. The cameras caught everything. Jimmy Kimmel had been away for a week. He returned to find, as he told his audience that night, that a year had apparently occurred in his absence. He walked out to the kind of applause an audience reserves for someone they are relieved to see. The particular warmth of people who have been accumulating things to say and finally have someone to say them to. He let the applause settle. He looked at his desk. He looked back at the audience. "I went on vacation," he said, "and I feel like I left a house and came back to an archaeological dig." He did not explain the metaphor immediately. He let it sit, the way a good line sits when it knows it will mean more in 20 minutes than it does right now. He moved to the Truth Social post from Easter Sunday. He read it aloud. Every word, every capital letter, every exclamation mark, the closing line arriving with the same deliberateness with which it had been typed. The audience received it in pieces, the laugh of recognition in the first sentence, the quieting in the middle, the specific stillness at the end when the room could not decide whether what it had heard was funny or something else entirely. "If your grandfather sent this," Kimmel said, folding the paper with the care of a man handling something fragile. "Straight to the emergency room, no discussion. Shoes on before you finish the second paragraph." The studio released. The laugh was long and genuine. The particular relief of a room that has been given permission to feel what it has been feeling since Sunday morning. Kimmel waited for it to settle. Then he played the clip. The clip ran without introduction. Trump at the rope line. The Easter Bunny over his left shoulder, patient, costumed, professionally still. The brass band audible behind everything. Trump's voice flat and certain. Bridges, power plants, nothing, oil, profit. And then the band still playing, and the children somewhere off camera, and the specific dissonance of all of it arriving in the same 47 seconds of unedited footage. The studio absorbed it the way it had absorbed the Truth Social reading. Laugh, quiet, stillness. But this time, the stillness lasted longer. 3 full seconds of a studio audience that had run out of response and was simply sitting with what it had seen. Kimmel looked at them. "I'm not making accusations," he said quietly. "I'm doing archaeology." The line landed, not as a laugh, as a recognition. The audience understood instinctively that archaeology was the right word, that what Kimmel was doing was not commentary and not comedy, but excavation. The careful, patient work of brushing away the surface until the shape underneath becomes impossible to deny. "The archaeology is done," he said. "What's buried is now on the table." One person in the second row began to applaud, stopped, started again. 2 people beside them joined. Not wild applause, the slow, deliberate kind, hands coming together because something true had been said plainly, in a room full of people who had felt it and hadn't had the word for it until now. Colbert's approach that same evening came from a different angle, but arrived at the same excavation. Where Kimmel had read and replayed, Colbert reconstructed. He built the timeline visually, a whiteboard, a marker, each entry written by hand as he spoke it, the physical act of writing, lending each deadline a weight that reading from a screen does not. Tuesday, Wednesday, 48 hours, 72 hours, midnight tomorrow. A rolling sequence of ultimatums that kept extending without resolving, each one leaving behind it a residue of escalation that never quite dissipated before the next one arrived. "This is not a foreign policy," Colbert said, stepping back from the board and looking at what he had written with the expression of a man regarding evidence he has gathered over a long time. "This is the archaeology of a decision that keeps getting postponed. The layers are right here. You can see them." He tapped the board once. "What's under them is what we're all waiting for." The audience was still, not the stillness of confusion, the stillness of understanding. Colbert picked up his marker, wrote one final entry on the board. Not a date, not a deadline, but a question mark. Placed it at the end of the sequence, stepped back. "That," he said, "is where we are." The clips from both segments were online before either show had finished airing. Not in pieces, whole. People shared them without captions because the captions had already been written by the footage itself. Trump's overnight responses arrived in the familiar pattern. Capital letters, exclamation marks compounding, each statement longer and more specific than the one before, until the specificity itself became the story, the volume of the denial outweighing anything the denial was trying to accomplish. Every response was screenshotted and placed beside the clip it denied. The composed host on one side, the unraveling fury on the other. The contrast required no commentary and received none. By morning, journalists who had covered 3 administrations were using language they had never used before. Not political language, not legal language, but the language of people trying to describe something that does not fit inside existing categories. Unprecedented had worn out months ago. What replaced it was quieter and harder to dismiss. Simply, repeatedly, the acknowledgement that what was happening had not happened before, and that the archaeology Kimmel had named was something everyone had been doing, alone, in the dark, without a word for it. Now there was a word, and the dig was still ongoing. The Easter Bunny had gone back to wherever Easter bunnies go after the cameras leave. The brass band had packed up. The eggs had been collected. The children had gone home. But the footage remained. The deadline remained. The question mark at the end of Colbert's whiteboard remained, written in black marker on a white surface, surrounded by dates that had all promised resolution and delivered none. After everything you just saw, ask yourself one thing. What else has been hiding behind the noise? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story isn't over. It's just getting started.